It's Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025. Going kinetic against the cartels, the DC mayor relents and the UK continues on its totalitarian bent. Next on the AM Update. President Trump yesterday during a news conference made three different announcements, including this one that just moments before he started that news conference, the United States took kinetic action against a cartel narco-terrorist organization.
When you come out and when you leave the room, you'll see that we just, over the last few minutes, literally shot out a boat, a drug-carrying boat, a lot of drugs in that boat. And you'll be seeing that and you'll be reading about that. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time.
So President Trump makes the announcement. The United States military took action against a drug boat. Hunter Biden, hardest hit. Also, President Trump at that news conference, the purpose of that news conference was to announce the changing of the U.S. Space Force Command headquarters from Colorado to this red state.
The U.S. Space Command headquarters will move to the beautiful locale of a place called Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City. Okay, so Huntsville, Alabama, we love Alabama.
So going from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Alabama, that is the Space Force headquarters. President Trump also confirmed their plans to move into Chicago to combat crime and to continue their crime crackdown.
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter.
So that is President Trump touting what's gone on in D.C. Speaking of D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser signed executive orders yesterday, just completely capitulating to President Trump. Just completely. I mean, this is Washington, D.C.'s Marxist mayor, Muriel Bowser, who has talked tough about standing up to Trump and his stormtroopers in Washington, D.C. She signed an executive order yesterday outlining how she is instructing Washington, D.C.'s police to cooperate with federal law enforcement indefinitely. So there's that. Speaking of Chicago, going back there again, Mayor Brandon Johnson, he woke up yesterday morning, did a little bit of, let's just call it, tiptoeing around the lines of treason, calling for people to stand up to President Trump's federal law enforcement if they come to his city, and also said this:
shootings will continue as long as this presidential administration continues to put politics over people.
Explain that to me like I'm 3 years old, Mr. Esteemed and well-spoken African-American. That was the same mayor a few weeks ago who called President Trump puerile and petite, because he's intimidated by the intellectual prowess of people like him. Please explain, connect those dots to me like I'm 3 years old, how shootings will continue as long as Trump continues to crack down on crime. Is that a threat? Is that a threat? Up north, we go north from Chicago to Wisconsin. Here's Governor Tony Evers.
I believe that in Wisconsin, our ability to keep our undocumented people working like they are now at a really high numbers in the state of Wisconsin, if he takes that to a improper end, our economy will be gone.
There's saying the quiet part out loud again. Might I suggest that if the economy of any given state, any given region is solely dependent on whether or not illegal aliens are able to work jobs that probably should be given to the citizens of that country, I'd say that's a sham economy. Nevertheless, the Pentagon yesterday authorized sending 600 military lawyers to the Justice Department to serve as temporary immigration judges. The military will begin sending groups of 150 attorneys, both military and civilians, to the Justice Department as soon as practicable. And the military services should have the first round of people identified by next week. The effort comes as the Trump administration, of course, more regularly turns to the military as it cracks down on illegal immigration, as it should, as ICE is being staffed, enjoying more funding from the big, beautiful bill. To the Senate we go. Joni Ernst, senator from Iowa, says she's not running. She confirmed those rumors and reports yesterday in this video.
My fellow Iowans, serving as your United States Senator is the privilege of a lifetime. From growing up and working on my family's farm in rural southwest Iowa to more than 2 decades of leadership in the U.S. Army Reserves and Iowa Army National Guard, where I deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, to my work as Montgomery County Auditor, State Senator, and now as your United States Senator. It has been an honor to dedicate my life to the service of our great state and country.
Okay, whatever. The only thing that Joni Ernst has accomplished in her career as a politician is producing a really, really good commercial, a really, really good campaign ad over a decade ago, and nearly tanking the nomination of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. Nearly stillbirthed that nomination before it even had any legs. So there's that. Not to worry, though. Ashley Hinson, who is a congresswoman from Iowa, announced yesterday she's running in Joni Ernst's stead. And I'm sure it's just, boy, they just got things totally blindsided the Ashley Hinson brigade that Joni Ernst was retiring. Totally blindsided them because they came back right out and said, hey, we're running. And hey, we've got some endorsements from some high-ish profile senators as well. That's not been in the works behind the scenes at all, I'm sure. Totally not astroturfed at all. So congratulations, Joni Ernst, on your great accomplishment, obtaining a federal pension and leeching off the backs of taxpayers for the rest of your life. Well done. So the Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives released 33,295 pages of Epstein-related records that were provided by the U.S. Department of Justice. On August 5th, Chairman Comer issued a subpoena for records related to Jeffrey Epstein, and the Department of Justice has indicated it will continue producing those records while ensuring the redaction of victim identities and any child sexual abuse material. Sorry to disappoint you. I have not had time yet to go through those 33,000 pages of documents. Before the break, let's check in on one representative, Rashida Tlaib, at something called the People's Conference for Palestine. Wow, she's just keep in mind here, she is very smart and very articulate.
Every genocide enabler, look at this rooms, motherfuckers. We ain't going anywhere.
Okay. That is a congresswoman. We're not going anywhere, mother. Just a lovely, charming individual. Rashida Tlaib from the great state of Michigan. That ideology, whatever produces that ideology, just has to be defeated. You can pick your poison on the left. You've got the gender madness cabal caucus on the one side. And then you've got the absolute psychopathic genocidal hatred of Jews. I mean, what she was saying there is that if you think Israel has the right to exist, you are a mother-blanking dictator. Scum of the earth. So pick your poison in the Democrat Party, the gender madness or anti-Semites like Rashida Tlaib. Well, when we come back, speaking of something that has to be defeated, totalitarianism on the rise in the United Kingdom. The latest, most egregious example unfolded yesterday. Also, why I don't get too up or down about different guests that one Tucker Carlson has on, because he platformed a very important voice recently. We'll talk about that and more next. The co-creator of the UK sitcom Father Ted was arrested at London Heathrow Airport on Monday, allegedly over several social media posts criticizing so-called transgenderism. Graham Linehan recounted the ordeal on his Substack, saying there were signs of something strange happening before he landed in London. According to the former comedy writer, a gate agent in the U.S. said he did not have a seat on his flight back home and needed to be issued a new ticket, something he didn't think much of at the time. However, since the arrest, Linehan wrote on Substack, he believes he was flagged because someone somewhere, probably wearing unconvincing makeup, made a call. When he got off the plane at Heathrow, Linehan was met by 5 armed officers who told him he was being arrested over 3 posts on X. Linehan wrote, quote, "In a country where pedophiles escape sentencing, where knife crime is out of control, where women are assaulted and harassed every time they gather to speak, the state had mobilized 5 armed officers to arrest a comedy writer for this tweet. And no, I promise you, I'm not making this up." In one of the posts that got Linehan arrested, he wrote, quote, "If a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent, abusive act." He then said that those encountering such a scenario should make a scene and call police and even punch the offender. So this comedy writer, he's Irish, by the way, this comedy writer was arrested for stating the fact that dudes who feel pretty are whacked in the head, and if they are in a female bathroom and you are a female encountering a dude who feels pretty whacked in the head, you have every right to call police, make a scene, and defend yourself. He got arrested for saying that on social media, for typing that out. If that's not totalitarianism, I don't know what is. Graham Linehan, comedy writer, Irish comedy writer, arrested off the plane in London's Heathrow Airport for a post on X. And now here's this. Christian author Lee Strobel joined Tucker Carlson recently. And by the way, this is the most recent example. I don't get too high or low on Tucker Carlson based on who he's interviewing. I absolutely cannot stand some of the content that comes out of some of his guests sometimes. But then he goes and platforms people like Lee Strobel. Now, Lee Strobel pointed out how Hollywood, he believes, is under the direct influence of a real demonic realm. And when you listen to Lee Strobel, it makes a lot of sense as to everything you've seen out of Hollywood, especially over the last 20 to 30 years.
The biggest problem in our culture is to deny that there is a demonic realm, pretend like there isn't.
So what are the hallmarks of it then?
Well, I think some things you mentioned, we see manifestations of it in ways that defy natural explanations. And I think that's probably the best way of
disorder, distraction, chaos, violence, hate, division. Maybe.
And you think if Satan were smart, which he is, would he go around the country and around the world trying to possess or bother average everyday people? Well, you know what? Much more efficient to go to Hollywood and to influence a bunch of people there who are very influential in, let's say, the entertainment industry. And let's say he encourages them to create films and television shows that are funny and that are creative and that are fun. But there's an underlying message to them, that there's a normalization of immoral activity that makes it normal. Because, you know, when we laugh, it opens us up to various possibilities. When we laugh, our defenses come down. So I'm thinking of a wonderful, funny TV show like Friends. Remember Friends, the TV show? It was on TV for years. Very popular show.
Only American who never saw it, but yeah.
But underlying that is a very ugly sexual ethic that normalizes multiple sexual partners and that sort of thing. The kind of thing that Satan would love to inculcate into American culture. And you know what? I think it's much more efficient for Satan to influence movie makers and TV makers in Hollywood to create products that feed us stuff that, without us even realizing it, open us up to the occult, open us up to immoral activity, normalize it in ways that, well, if Monica can do that on Friends, I can certainly have sex on the first date with this guy I meet.
So the way I, as a non-theological, ignorant person, try and figure out whether something's good or bad, because it is an open question very often. It's like, is that good or bad? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Are the people doing it at peace and joyful, happy?
Yeah.
Are they tormented?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people in Hollywood, a lot of people I like, actually, not too many happy people.
Yeah.
Some really tormented people.
It's true.
For real.
Yeah.
String of wrecked relationships, kids who hate them, trans kids, drug problems. Like there's so much of that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a fair way to assess?
I think because it is logical that if Satan were to try to influence a culture in a mass way, that is a logical way that he would do it. And, oh, guess what? By the way, look at all the dysfunction we see in that community. It does seem to match up.
So if evil is acting through you, you are harmed too.
Generally, I would say yes. You're going to be someone who's trying to influence others. You may not realize the full reasons why.
But it destroys you.
Yeah, it does destroy you.
It certainly seems to.
Yeah, I think so. Who would, God created us so we could have a relationship with him. So he taught us how we can live in a way that maximizes who we are. And when we stray from that in egregious ways, as many people have and do, there are implications for us.
That is prolific author and apologist Lee Strobel speaking with Tucker Carlson about his theory regarding Hollywood and whether or not it's under the influence of demons. And I think what he laid out there is undeniably true. If the devil were smart, which he is, why would you bother going the more difficult, the more roundabout routes of influencing an entire culture, an entire civilization? Of course, we export Hollywood to the rest of the world. Why would you go about any other roundabout ways? Go straight to mass media. Go straight to the silver screen. I think there's a lot of content that backs that up. However, for air analysis today, slightly acidic, mostly necessary, I want to touch back on something that I said about Tucker Carlson a couple of times. I don't get too high, I don't get too low on, depending on the guests that he has on his show. From what I can see, he's still very popular. He still has a lot of views, a lot of downloads. People come to him to be interviewed. That's a sign that he does have some real sway and influence, or at least a large audience. But the reason I don't get too high or too low on him is because for every martyr-made Daryl Cooper, alternative historian, who questions whether or not the Allies were actually the bad guys in World War II, whether or not that's the precise argument that he's making is neither here nor there. I don't want to misrepresent things one way or another. For every let's take another look at Hitler guest that he has on. He has somebody who has an important and I think a very sober voice like Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel's not the only one. Tucker Carlson has had a lot of good guests on. A lot of guests who espouse views I find rather, let's just call that not reprehensible, but I let's just say outside the mainstream, unorthodox. There's one theory, however, that I'm starting to develop as to why Tucker Carlson has some of these, let's call them unsavory guests on. And it doesn't do very much pushback in some of their assertions. And why he also has some guests on like Lee Strobel, who's a hardcore Christian, a hardcore, I think he's evangelical. Tucker Carlson has had some reformed bros that, a lot of people have never heard of before on his program to discuss Christian nationalism and other things like that. There's one theory that I'm starting to think about that explains why he has this hodgepodge of guests on, all from the right-wing spectrum to extreme right-wing, where we're starting to, hey, maybe we misunderstood Hitler, which I find ridiculous, to another extreme, Christian nationalism, reformed, which I don't find extreme at all. I just think it's a sect that has been dormant for a long time in Protestant Christianity. He's got this vast array of right-wing thought. Some of these ideas have never really been exposed to the Gen Pop before. So why does he have this vast spectrum of guests on, from reprehensible to just unexposed, and never really pushes back at all? I don't think he's actually trying to speak to the Gen Pop. I don't think he is. I think he has a broad audience, but I don't think he's trying to reach a broad audience. I don't think he's trying to speak to a broad audience. I think that it's possible. Tucker Carlson's goal with his career at this juncture is to speak to the nation's elites, to speak to Western civilization's elites, to try to provide some exposure therapy or shock therapy to their preconceived notions of how everyone thinks and everyone operates and how the world operates for most people. I think he's trying to wake them up to the reality that there's a lot of people, a vast array of people who think completely diametrically opposite or differently than you think. Harvard educated, elite university educated, titans of industry, things of that nature. I think he's trying to do some shock therapy to that very small segment of our population. Because I think Tucker Carlson also recognizes whether or not you have a good civilization that's on the upswing, a bad civilization that's headed towards the ash heap of history, you're always going to have an elite class. The question always is, though, whether those elites are good, whether those elites are actually of good character and benevolent. It's possible that you can have elites like that. But I think Tucker Carlson might see, I don't know anything behind the scenes at all, but I'm just trying to put together a theory, kind of putting some rhyme or reason as to why he has on whom he has on as guests and some of the things that they talk about there. I think it might be exposure or shock therapy to the elite class. That's going to do it for a Wednesday. My days are screwed up this week. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.